Here's all you need to know about the state of the Indianapolis Colts right now on this Friday, getting set to go down to Jacksonville. Now, that sounds a little extreme, and perhaps it is. But I remember when I worked in local news, the theme of every single day was localize the story. Localize the story. You know, there's a story about a man in Belarus that wins the lottery for the largest lottery collection in history at $2.5 billion. And it's like, find out whether or not that guy ever actually went into a cafe and sat next to somebody who was on vacation from New Jersey that once stepped foot in the state of Indiana. Got to localize it. Okay. So to localize the Colts practice that's getting underway right now in terms of this show and thus our audience, the best way to say where the Colts are would be this. And the fabulous Query and Company Fantasy Football League, which is essentially cared about by the members of the Query and Company Fantasy Football League and probably a few others. But people that listen to this show know that when that draft took place, I had to do the auto draft because I was, doing a radio show. Did not seem to be a hindrance to the two of you who laboriously sat at the public library for hours upon hours and bought every magazine and every other aspect of research possible. And both of you are behind me in the standings in our league that was automated in terms of giving me my roster. But the problem is I was given 9 quarterbacks and no running backs. So I've now had to go and just scrounge off the heap pile for running backs. So last night I realized I have no running backs this week, and I thought, well, here's what I'll do. I'll go and just get one of the Colts' backup running backs because there's the possibility that they are going to play this week. Trey Sermon may actually be playing and getting significant carries this week because Jonathan Taylor is still a question mark. And I go, and I'm all excited, and I'm going to outsmart everybody, and I get there, and it says, would you like to trade for this player? Somebody in our league has already grabbed Trey Sermon because that's the level of uncertainty as to where we are right now with Jonathan Taylor. Anthony Richardson is expected to again practice today. He has done so over the course of the week with increased reps. Jonathan Taylor, on the other hand, Eddie, am I correct in saying, yet to be seen on the practice field for the Colts today?
That is correct, Jake. He is not out there per Kevin Bowen. He does not have eyes on him. And Ian Rappaport this morning of NFL Network said that, quote, Taylor is going to miss some time. So does not sound like Jonathan Taylor will be playing for the Colts in 2 days.
I should have gone out and gotten Trey Sermon. Darn it. Instead, I've got some guy I've never heard of from, I don't know, the Jets or something. I don't know. At any rate, it is a Friday. Happy Friday to you. I think we got to play some Working for the Weekend by Loverboy. I know that song's like 45 years old, but when I hear it, I just automatically think of this time of year. Weather's great. It's beautiful. Good weekend ahead. German Fest tomorrow. We got the Dachshund Dash, formerly known as the Wiener Dog Races. It's the highlight of my play-by-play racing career that I get to call the Wiener Dog Races in front of the Anthonium and the Rathskeller. It's the best. The Stein holding competition. Stein holding competition is always fun because it's always a bunch of guys that have had about, at that point, 6 or 7 beers. They're all convinced they're going to rip their shirt off and look like Lou Ferrigno. And then literally some 5'2", 98-pound woman will come and blow them all away and sit there and hold her Stein without moving for like 20 minutes. It's incredible. Brat eating contest. There's only been one time where somebody recycled. So it's a lot of fun. Look forward to it, and a big weekend ahead of us. But Colts and Jaguars are going to be a big part of the conversation today. Obviously, some high school football as well. My name is Jake Query. You just heard the voice of Eddie Garrison. Jimmy Cook here as well. It is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Jimmy, we'll begin with this. I'm assuming yesterday, and this is always tough, and people laugh at me because maybe, I don't know if I don't think I have like outdated televisions or whatever else, but the only problem with when NFL games are on like Amazon Prime, for example, Prime Video, is going back and forth from that and then over to regular television takes a few there's like a delay with mine. Am I unusual here?
I mean, you're in the same camp of Chris Mad Dog Russo. I heard him complain about that the other day. Now, granted, he's got you by a decent amount of years there, Jake. But yes, you have to use a different remote for most people to access Prime that you would your ordinary cable service or ordinary television service. So there is an extra step or two where you can just hit the last button with regular cable. So I don't think you're alone.
Okay, here's the thing I noticed last night. I would like to know this first, Jimmy. You went with what viewing option last night?
I always go with the Prime Vision, which shows you
No.
wider.
Which sporting event?
Oh, I was slipping back and forth. I at one point had the iPad with the baseball and the TV with the Prime. So I was watching both.
Eddie, you went with what?
I was doing the same thing.
Okay.
Did you choose? Did you go solo on one?
I
mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
was at an event last night, actually. I was at a fundraiser last night until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then when I got home, I'm like, okay, I'll watch. I kind of surfed. I mean, we had a lot going on. But I primarily watched.
How were the waves?
It was a Kona big wave. Thank you. Not bad, actually. I'm like Greg Brady on a surfboard. But I primarily watched the NFL game, and this was my question. And I think I have an answer here, but here is my question. As I'm watching the game, and I sent this out on the X Twitter, and so I don't think that I'm totally alone in this, but I do think that perhaps how you are ingesting the game may be part of this. But as I'm watching the game last night, and I absolutely love Al Michaels. I think Al Michaels is, for my generation, Al Michaels, and for yours as well, which speaks to the greatness of Al Michaels. His voice means big event. This is the whole country is tuned in because Al Michaels' voice is on it. And I like Kirk Herbstreit. I think of him the same, like with the primetime college football games. I think he's an outstanding, analyst, and he's likable. He's easy to understand. But there's something about the Thursday night broadcasts on Prime that just feel off. And let me give you three things, and I want you guys to tell me, A, if you've noticed either of them, or B, if any of them are the primary reason. Number one, for me, and maybe it's the way I'm ingesting it, I'm not going to say the name of it, but I'm watching it at Shannon's house, who, believe me, Shannon's a TV fiend, so like we always have the latest whatever it is. So she's got the big theater size, the whole deal, right? Every possible channel, streaming service, whatever else.
You guys are watching in VR now?
But we're not watching in VR, but close.
Okay, all right.
I felt like I wanted to go to the varsity because I felt like I was that close in Atlanta. No, so as I'm watching the game, the color and the video quality looks slightly off. It's a little bit washed out. And it feels like occasionally it kind of buffers, but that's not the main issue that I have.
Also had that happen to me a couple times last night.
Okay. Admittedly, Al Michaels has lost his fastball a little bit. I still think that he's the best ever to do it. I have nothing but respect for him, and his worst day is 10 times better than my best day or anybody else's. I get that. But he feels a little bit like he's mailed it in. Like he's like, look, I get it. He feels a little bit like Eric the Clown in Seinfeld. He's like, look, what are you hassling me for? This is just a gig, okay? Like it kind of feels that way. But the big thing is, and there are two other factors here. One of them also is it seemed to me like there are no, and I don't know if it's a bare bones broadcast crew, but there are very few like crowd shots and wide shots, and the audio, there's no crowd mic or audio, and it just feels flat. I mean, it literally felt like we were in COVID and they were doing the broadcast remotely with no crowd noise, and they weren't showing any sort of a crowd. It didn't feel electric. It didn't feel exciting. You weren't seeing the drama, the tension, the excitement, the enthusiasm of the fans, nor hearing them, at least on the way that I was taking it in. Maybe our audio setup was different. I don't know. But it sounded like they weren't even at the venue. And then lastly, and I think this is the big one, and I've mentioned this before, I think the NFL, by doing a weekly Thursday game, and I love the NFL, and I know everybody loves the NFL and everything else, but it does feel like it's a little bit oversaturated is the wrong word, but Monday Night Football in its infancy was special because it was the one special, it was the one dessert to the week. It was the one game that you knew everybody from Seattle to Miami to Richmond to Roanoke to Mesa was watching it. And now there are so many options going on, and in particular with the NFL, there is a daily – it feels like there's a game 4 times a week, and it just doesn't feel as emphasized as it did before. So having said that, feel free, both of you, to tell me that I'm wrong in any of these and that you didn't notice any of it, or the one that you think it may be the biggest culprit here.
Prime's production value is spotty at times. There will be moments where, when they first started a season or two ago when Prime took over Thursday Night Football, I would restart my router thinking it was my internet connection, and then there would still be moments where it would buffer. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's still infrastructure issues with what Amazon has set up. I would hope not. So they're a global, I guess you could label them as a tech company, but a media company, certainly still a distribution company, and you would think they would have the foresight to have gotten that squared away by now. I would admit that there are times on Thursday Night Football broadcasts in the Prime area where it feels like the crowd isn't popping as much as it would on a Monday Night Football broadcast or a Sunday Night Football game. Certainly the crowd energy is still there. You can see the visuals of it being a packed crowd. It's not like attendance is going down across the league. And to your last point about the oversaturation, perhaps, of NFL on the calendar, the only one I really have a problem with that I feel like by week 8, it's like, man, this game is garbage, is Thursday Night Football. And Al Michaels has joked about that in the past. For whatever reason, this struggle
it was a good game last night.
It was a good game last night, yes. But generally speaking, the stereotype of Thursday Night Football games is you're going to get more stuff like that infamous Colts-Broncos game a year ago than you are a thrilling, right down to the wire, overtime walk-off touchdown that you get last night between Tampa Bay and Atlanta. So I would agree with you. Thursday Night Football is stereotyped that way, but like Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, that is still as must-see television to me as it's ever been. Eddie?
For me personally, last night, it was after we're halfway through the second quarter. I turned to Olivia and I go, my goodness, are you bored watching this good game? And she goes, yeah. I was like, I don't know what it is. And it made me think of like how I compare the Major League Baseball playoff coverage and production with ESPN to Fox, TBS, and TNT. So we all just watched ESPN, or whoever did watch Major League Baseball, the playoffs, have watched ESPN. Their coverage is now over. Now, compare that when you consume these next couple of games to CBS, or not CBS, TBS, TNT, and MLB Network, or whatever. And the production quality is so much better because there is more emphasis on the crowd,
right?
And the ambient. And that's the big one for me.
When you were saying that you were bored during the game, was it the competition that you were bored by, or the lack of energy?
Lack of energy.
It felt like their crowd mic was muted, right?
I think the one thing that when you're comparing like Thursday night to Sunday night to Monday night, when you look at the music for all of that, for like in terms of the music coming back or like the intro music,
right,
the Thursday night music is dull in itself.
Yeah, if you're ranking
so it doesn't
themes,
give you any.
If you're ranking themes, Thursday Night Football is going to be back.
The Sunday night music on NBC, which, by the way, let's just be real here. The Sunday night NBC game has now become the marquee game of the week.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
but the Sunday night music, when they do it, they whoever selects the songs, they are always in theme with something
correct,
that
yeah,
took
it's
place,
culturally based or city based or historically
or something that
based.
happened
yes,
over the course of the conversation since the last time out, etc. And that makes that fun as well. But yes,
part of Monday Night Football's struggles as well, Jake, has been they haven't, and they have the last couple of years, but there were question marks post Al Michaels, post Mike Tirico about what that booth is. And they finally reestablished that with Aikman and Buck the last 2 seasons. Like, that is now, I agree with you, Sunday Night Football is kind of still the marquee window you have to watch, but the reputation of Monday Night Football has somewhat been restored.
I would agree
by
with that.
Having a competent booth together.
Yes, a clear dominant booth, right? No
question
about it.
I have an update here from West 56th Street. James Boyd said, looks like Joe Flacco is taking most, if not all, of the first-team reps today. Anthony Richardson is standing behind Flacco right now and just watching him throw during the red zone/end zone drill.
We might have to bounce back with CNC Music Factory, things that make you go, This is after Anthony Richardson had been practicing on, albeit a limited basis, but was inching his way back to the point where it seemed as though he would go to this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, based on the way he was speaking to the media and him still getting reps in a limited fashion, you would think that he would go this week. My biggest rule of thumb is always by end of week, by that final practice, can you get a full participant designation on your injury chart? And if you can't, and you're limited again, and especially if you're not taking reps with the first team, like this is different if the roles were reversed, right? If it was Flacco that was hurt and you were hearing he didn't take the first team reps, you'd be like, well, he's a veteran. He's experienced. He's seen a ton. He's won a Super Bowl. You don't need him to get a first rep or first team rep this week. That's totally fine. With Richardson, if that trend continues today through practice where he didn't get any reps with the first team, I would lean towards they're going to be cautious with him from an injury standpoint.
Is there gamesmanship here?
No, I don't think to that level.
You don't think there's gamesmanship of keep Jacksonville guessing a little bit?
I mean, it's hard because you know to an extent what Anthony Richardson is and isn't to this point, in that he is an enigma of if he's going to be good or bad accuracy-wise.
I guess the biggest gamesmanship would be to throw Richardson out there because Jacksonville,
sure,
there's as big an enigma, to your point, Jimmy. I didn't mean, but there's Anthony Richardson, by having him out there, that's as big a question mark as there is, right?
Yes.
Because nobody, including Jacksonville, nor the Colts, nor Anthony Richardson, know what Anthony Richardson is and which one's going to show up, right?
Yes. I also don't believe the Colts are at a point from a luxury standpoint where let's just say, for the sake of argument, Jake, that the Colts' views don't align with yours and mine, which is to say, I don't really care if they make the playoffs this year. All I want to see is Anthony Richardson grow and develop and get a better, clearer picture by season's end of what he is. Let's say that is not their primary goal this season. Let's say their goal, like most franchises, is still to win and get to the playoffs. Well, if you're wanting to do that with where you're at record-wise at 2-2 and the schedule that still unfolds for you in a couple weeks, you don't have the luxury of gamesmanship and playing around and toying around with who's getting first reps or not to maybe confuse the lifeless Jacksonville Jaguars. You just don't have that at your disposal. So if you're putting Flacco out there with first-team reps today, in my mind, you're doing it because he is going to be your starter this week. Again, that's my assumption. That's not a report. He's going to be your starter this week because you feel like he is your healthiest quarterback right now, and you can't jeopardize Anthony Richardson as it stands. But no, gamesmanship can't be a part of that. You don't have the luxury, because I think Shane Steichen still wants to win. Of course he does. NFL head coach. He wants to get to the playoffs, and you can't afford to fool around on a Friday.
My thing is this. I'm going to maintain this, and this is a hill. I went one time to Red River Gorge with my buddies Mike Hillary and Adam Sharp and Dave Steinberg, 1990. One of my favorite photos of all time is the four of us sitting out in front of a general store in Slade, Kentucky, drinking ale-8s, thinking that we were the king of the mountains. We had no idea, king of the mountain. We had no idea, kings of the mountain, I guess I should say. We're sitting there drinking these ale-8s after a 13-mile hike, feeling like we're on top of the world. We all had just turned 21. We're drinking these ale-8s. We buy a 12-pack of it. We go back to the campsite. We're like, man, we're drinking these things all night. Like, look how we are rough and tough because this stuff isn't even affecting us because we're real men. And then we realized that we were drinking ginger ale.
I was going to say, I didn't want to get totally dunked on. I didn't know what ale-8s was, so I looked it up. I'm like, Jake, this is a soft drink.
Yeah,
what are we doing?
And it's awesome, right? It's awesome. You can now buy it here. Back then. But one of my favorite photos of all time, we're all sitting there. I love everything about that photo, right?
Sure.
But there is during that trip at Red River Gorge, which is fabulous, by the way, if you've never been there, there's an overhang. There's kind of a cliff. I think it's called like Half Moon Rock, and it overlooks this huge field below you. You'd think you're like in the cliffs of Ireland. And my body like froze going out on it because you're like a couple hundred feet up over this field. And I literally kind of froze. But I would be willing to go back out on that exact cliff and actually die on it if it is symbolically representative of this narrative. I'm willing to die on this hill. The 2024 Indianapolis Colts season is 100, 1,000, 1,000,000% about the development of Anthony Richardson. And yes, do they want to win every game? Of course they do.
You and I are in agreement on that, by the way.
Of course they do. But if there is a game going in where they feel it is advantage to start Joe Flacco for the betterment of this season, but Anthony Richardson is healthy, the only thing that stops Anthony Richardson from being on the field is if they feel that psychologically speaking, he needs to sit back and watch because he's starting to feel ghosts. That's it. Any other time that he is available to play, he is absolutely 150% playing. because the Colts need to make certain and sure without question and with 100% certainty that he has seen every different look, that he has played in every different element, that he has presented himself in every different situation, and that he's handled every bit of pressure that comes with it. And so there is not going to be a situation other than his physical or emotional health where he is held out of the starting lineup. As well as Joe Flacco can play, as well as he played a year ago in Cleveland to help them stay afloat, none of that matters with this year because they lost a year of it, Jimmy. They lost a year of his development, and so it's like your 401k. If you have a 401k that you decided to not start until you're 40, you are contributing to it, and you're more, believe me, speaking from experience, and you are more aggressive towards the saving of it than somebody who did the right thing and started at 25. With Anthony Richardson, they missed that first year, which in football terms is 8 to 10 years of your 401k saving. They've got to be aggressive now. They got to push all in. They got to go all in, and that's what they're going to do this year. If he's able to go, he's going.
Yeah, correct. I just feel like at this stage, and we only have a season's worth of body of work to go with off Shane Steichen, but generally speaking, when I'm looking at other coaching staffs around the National Football League, if on a game day Friday, you are not, or, on the last day of practice leading into Sunday, if you are not having the quarterback of your choice get first-team reps, and he is still as inexperienced as Anthony Richardson is, I would lean towards they're probably being cautious with him towards a health-wise standpoint. Could be wrong. That's just where I tend to lean.
On the program today, we have again a set of Billy Joel and Sting tickets to give away. That concert, February 8th at Lucas Oil Stadium. Tickets went on sale, I believe, this morning. I'm guessing that they have already flown off the proverbial shelves, but no worries. We have a pair to give away. We will do it today, and it will be, we've oscillated back and forth on this. Today's theme will be Billy Joel related, and we will do that coming up at some point in the 1 o'clock hour. Chris Hinton, our former Colt Friday, going to join us at the top of the hour. One of the guys that was a real crown jewel and a very interesting factoid about the way he entered as a Colt and the way he departed as a Colt. There's an interesting tie-in, I'll tell you, on the other side on both of those. Want to let you also know, by the way, that Jiffy Lube, of course, bringing you our opening segment today. Now through the end of the year, anybody who belongs to a monthly car wash program can get $20 off a signature service oil change and a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube. I love Jiffy Lube. I saw Glenn up in Pendleton. He was awesome on Pendleton Pike. Great dude, but any of the Jiffy Lubes can take care of you. Come in, simply point your car wash sticker on your car, and Jiffy Lube will do the rest. Big savings from your trusted one-stop shop for all your vehicle maintenance where you never need an appointment. That, of course, is Jiffy Lube. Okay, when we come back, more on the Colts and Jags, and what is it that is the common bond between the way Chris Hinton started as a Colt and ended as a Colt? I'll tell you that as well. Weekend's here, baby. By the way, my weekend began early this morning, bright and early. I was asleep, granted.
You were awake the whole time, so it never really ended.
That's right. No, I was up. Listen, Officer Craig, the official arbitrator of the program.
Yeah.
I chatted with him last night for like 2 hours. He sent me a text, and I gave him a call, and we ended up chatting for about 2 hours just about sports in Indianapolis. Cool conversation. I did not know, by the way, Officer Craig, the official arbitrator of the program. This story was, at the time that it happened, made some headlines, but when he was in high school, he was driving with his mom, and his mom had a heart attack in the car. And Officer Craig was like, what in the world? And she was, kind of pleading for help. She managed to pull over to the side of the road off of the interstate. He got out and was trying to flag down traffic. People would just assume, like, keep driving, keep driving. And finally, a car pulled over, and he's like, and the window rolls down, and he says, like, my mom's having a heart attack, help, help, help. And the driver gets out and happened to have a cell phone in an era where very few people did. And the driver called 911, and then when they took away Officer Craig's mother, who did survive, thankfully, and Officer Craig, the driver then stayed back and helped facilitate making sure the car was in a safe place and and basically stayed until they found out everything was okay, and it was Reggie Miller. Wow. And then I looked it up, and I'm like, and there's a whole story about it. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. At any rate, Chris Hinton. Eddie, did you have a guest? Chris Hinton, who is going to be our guest for Former Colt Friday coming up at 1 o'clock. I believe a 7-time Pro Bowler when he was a Colt, 2-time All-Pro. The way that he entered his career as a Colt and the way that he departed his career as a Colt have a strange common theme. Would you like to guess, Eddie, what it is?
I'm going to guess that his career started with the Colts playing the Jags, and it ended with the Colts playing the Jags, and they won both of those games.
Okay. Jimmy, do you have a guess?
I don't, just for the sake of our show ends at 3. I'm not certain. But I'm fascinated by the question.
Only problem with your guess, Eddie, is he departed Indianapolis in 1989.
And the Jags didn't form until 95.
Jags. What year did the Jags start?
95.
Is that when it was?
Yeah.
So I kind of led you down the path because Eddie said that was going to be his guess. And I said, well, you can say it on the air. Eddie looks less than thrilled.
Thank you.
That's the payback for
Lucy and Charlie Brown over here.
That's the payback for your Billy Joel trivia contest. No. So Chris Hinton was acquired by the then Baltimore Colts.
The Jags started after Chris Hinton retired.
Sorry, I didn't know.
Eddie, we did listen. I will confess right there, we kind of threw Eddie under the bus on that one.
Yep.
Here's the
thing. I'm a team player, though. I'll take it.
Eddie, here's the thing. For today, you can at least go home and say, I have something in common with Michael Jordan because today I was the GOAT, right?
Oh.
We kind of threw you under the bus on that, admittedly. Okay, so Chris Hinton was acquired. He was the 4th pick in the 1983 NFL draft out of Northwestern by the Baltimore Colts, by the Denver Broncos. But the Baltimore Colts had selected John Elway number 1 overall. Chris Hinton was part of the trade that sent John Elway from Baltimore to Denver. So Hinton, while drafted by the Broncos, never played for them. He was traded immediately to the Colts. So he was acquired by the Colts in exchange for the number 1 overall pick that was John Elway. His departure from Indianapolis came when he was traded to Atlanta in exchange for the rights to draft Jeff George, number 1 overall in the 90 draft. So he came in as part of a trade for the top quarterback and went out in the same fashion. Going to join us 1 o'clock today. Eddie, I do appreciate you being a good sport with that. I could tell Eddie's...
I'm always a good sport, Jake.
I could tell Eddie's angst. He just turned around, actually, and put a piece of candy in his mouth.
That's weird. It had Sour Patch labeling on the
That's
wrapper.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about the fact, if you're just joining us, by the way...
Oh, where have you been?
Thank you, Jimmy. What we have talked about is the fact that Anthony Richardson now is not taking starting reps in practice today. It is Joe Flacco that is doing that for the Colts over on West 56th Street. The other big story is the fact that Jonathan Taylor has yet to be seen on the practice field. Question I have for either of the two of you, and that is Kwity Paye or Kenny Moore on field today in terms of practice getting set for the Jaguars?
Negatory.
On both counts?
Yes.
All right.
So I think to your point, Jimmy, what you said yesterday is pretty key, and I agree with you. Kenny Moore would be a significant absence if he is not out on the field against Jacksonville. And this is not a team whose pass game intimidates. There's nothing about the Jaguars offensively really that throws you off. ETN is a very good back, but Trevor Lawrence is struggling mightily. They have yet to really get any sort of timing with their receivers. They are, to put it in the words of Matt Verderam, I believe he said tire fire.
Yeah,
right?
He did. There's 32 NFL teams last I checked, right? Am I still right on that?
I think that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
completion percentage, the Jaguars ranked 31st. Like, he has been, and it's not all Trevor Lawrence's fault. Admittedly, there's varying ranges between you and I of, you could say apologists for Trevor Lawrence, then we know Eddie Garrison has been on the I don't like Trevor Lawrence train from, like, not personally, but he just doesn't like Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback or a franchise quarterback since day one.
Yep.
That said, Jacksonville, and I've stressed this the last couple of days just to emphasize to Colts fans that the cliche is, oh, any given Sunday. I get that, but Jacksonville finally looked competent for 3.5 quarters against Houston last week. They probably should have beaten the Texans, but C.J. Stroud, gifted as he is in that Texans offense, they're able to win that game late.
And Miami.
That's true too. That was an opportunity for Jacksonville where you look back at that game and you think to yourself, man, that's one they could have had. But given, to borrow from Verderam, the tire fire they are, probably inconsequential big picture unless they really have a turning point moment, which could be this weekend. But I outline all that to say, from a Colts standpoint, the secondary has been the biggest question mark on this team since camp. And when you eliminate Juju Brents, which happened obviously a couple weeks ago, and you eliminate potentially this week again Kenny Moore, you're just asking for more trouble than needs to be had for this young secondary. Jalen Jones has impressed me far more than I anticipated going into this season. I figured that he would struggle. Granted, they haven't exactly played the tippy top of offenses in the AFC, but you play who's on your schedule. They've done their job. I just don't want to see Indianapolis be further shorthanded or hampered defensively like they would be if you take Kenny Moore against a Jacksonville team that figured some stuff out in the passing game a week ago.
Here's the thing. Without Kwity Paye there, if he's not able to go, Jacksonville, their offensive line has been an absolute sieve, right? Yeah. I mean, Lawrence has no time. And again, he has missed throws, don't get me wrong. But
and some would say he needs to be better.
He has no pocket, though.
Correct.
I mean, the second that whether he's going back on a 3-drop step or he's doing a shotgun, whatever it is, I mean, he is, and I do think I go back to, and this is why I give C.J. Stroud a ton of credit. I do think that when you are, and listen, I think Lawrence is as gifted as it gets coming out of college, but it is true that the learning curve for him from college to the NFL probably was greater than most quarterbacks because he was throwing to T. Higgins and Justin Ross with ETN behind him and guys playing on Sundays that were protecting him. So he had all kinds of time at Clemson.
Yeah.
He never had to acclimate to what happens when all of a sudden it's like in Star Wars when the compactor walls are coming in on you quickly. I mean, that's nice. In his head for sure. You like that?
I got that reference.
Well, I'm trying to diversify myself, right? But you know, I think that absolutely is coming into play, and the track record says that for the Colts, getting to him, you don't need your top flight personnel per se, but it certainly helps to have Kwity Paye there, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there's another player that I'm curious about on Sunday, whether or not this game falls into their hands or does not, in terms of big game production for the Colts that we could see on Sunday. I'll tell you who that is, and Chris Hinton, our former Colt Friday in 20. If there are two guys that are most curious about who gets the starting nod Sunday at the quarterback position for the Colts, and if you're curious, I don't know that you would say that Joe Flacco practicing today is definitively indication that he is going to get the starting nod. We'll get more from that from Kevin Bowen, who, by the way, when I mentioned earlier that my day started early this morning, even though I was asleep, it's because Kevin, and apparently this was the theme on the morning show.
He called you?
Yep, called me at 8:20 this morning and left me a voicemail.
Oh, really?
Somebody clearly, here's the thing. Whoever it is, I think it's Eddie, personally.
I was asleep at that time, so.
Whoever is sending us
I was also asleep at that time.
somebody has that app that we talked about where they can get one person to call the other. Somebody is doing that with Kevin and I for sure. I'll bet it happens today when Kevin joins us coming up at 2:00 today. Just
Are you sure it's not Mark
Franciscan
Dyson?
Feel Good Friday.
It's a good point.
Entirely possible that it's Mark
He has a
Dyson.
mutual connection with both.
That's the thing. You'd have to have both our phone numbers, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that somebody is playing a prank on us at this point, which was funny at the beginning, and now it's like it's not. I'm not saying it's not funny, but it's just kind of like, yeah. I mean, the gig's up, right? But the two guys that I would think are most curious or impacted, let's say that impacted by the starting quarterback would be Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman, because it does feel like each of those is more suited towards the different quarterback.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Alec Pierce really thrives when Anthony Richardson is the guy that is airing it out, and Michael Pittman really, his numbers go up theoretically. I mean, we haven't seen a lot, but it seems as though Pittman's style or strength is more catered towards what it is that Joe Flacco brings to the table, right?
Yeah, there's a natural tendency, whether it's just from the rapport that they've had in the short amount of time together, or whether it's just Joe Flacco liking big body receivers, but the way that Michael Pittman Jr. plays the game, always being near the sticks, always finding ways to be open. Like, yes, it was an aggressive game plan, at least in Flacco's mind, of targeting Pittman Jr. The other aspect of that, and yes, look, I'm not going to undercut Joe Flacco's ability still as a quarterback, but undoubtedly Anthony Richardson's still strongest, if not one of the strongest arms in the National Football League. You would think we're back to where we were a year ago when it comes to Alec Pierce, where he is not going to have the luxury of just bleep it, Alec Pierce is down there somewhere and going to be able to complete it the way Anthony Richardson can.
Do you guys have allergies? Either one of you guys get allergies?
Yes.
Yes.
I've never had allergies until I turned 50, and now it's Katie bar the door. But are we in allergy season? Because I don't think I've got like an illness going on, but I've got this weird, I don't know, like kind of itch.
Temperature change.
Yeah, that's usually when it happens for me. Generally in about
Well, is
6
that
months.
so am I allergic to temperature change?
No.
I think it's just your body reacting to the changes in
Yes.
weather.
But it's nice outside.
It is.
That doesn't mean your body cannot react to the change
So like
of
I'm like a
temperature.
dog. I can feel barometric pressure changing before it happens.
Is your nose wet?
I walked up today and first thing I did is started rubbing up against people. No, my nose feels dry. Yes.
Okay.
No, what about like right in here though? Just the little
Like congestion?
no congestion.
Okay.
No congestion. Little sandpapery.
All right.
No congestion. Just a little, like very slightly.
Yeah, I think it's just the changes in temperature. That's what happens to me. For example, in about 6 months, you'll yell at me and tell you to stay away from me when I'm taking Flonase left and right, and you'll be worried that I'm going to get you sick before
That's right.
an IndyCar event.
So this has never happened to me until again. Well, I used to never be bothered by this, and now all of a sudden it's happening. So it is allergies. Is that what this is?
Man,
what do I do for it?
You really are mad at Jake, aren't you? Usually the old man from
Yeah, Eddie is upset.
from Indiana farmlands usually always gets you. There's no
I wasn't paying
not even a
attention.
smile there. Okay.
Eddie got his feelings hurt, and so Eddie's upset today. What we're dealing with here is silent Eddie, right?
No.
Which actually sometimes is preferred, right?
He still controls the microphones. That's worth noting. Well, Jimmy. That was well played.
Jimmy,
Well
that
played.
may be you once Eddie gets up and walks out and boycott here, because I got a feeling we're close to it's baseball playoff time, and Eddie's about to just go ahead and throw a strike and get up and walk out. But I was curious what's going on with I guess it's allergies, right?
That's what I chalk it up to.
Now, the Colts have had an allergy when they go to Jacksonville. That we know. Does the streak end now? And if so, what needs to be done, because it doesn't feel like this is a matchup where you have to necessarily go and try to counter anything that Jacksonville's doing. Because what is Jacksonville doing? We have no idea what they're doing, right?
Look, I've not admittedly made my selection for this game yet. And so much of it is dictated by if we get a little bit more clarity from the health status of Kwity Paye and Kenny Moore. Because, Jake, if this game is without Anthony Richardson, if it's without Jonathan Taylor, if it's without Kwity Paye, if it's without Kenny Moore, and you look at what a mess Jacksonville is, their injury report still hasn't improved much at all. Everybody that we mentioned yesterday, from Hines Allen to Travis Etienne, is still limited. This has the potential to be a close-fought division battle, and what might that bring up? That very well might bring up what we started the show on Monday with, which is that it's going to come down to, dare I say, a kick or two, and then you're asking me to suddenly bet on Matt Gay to be able to end the drought in Jacksonville. There's a lot of variables here that if this was a Jacksonville team a year ago, I would comfortably tell you the Jaguars are going to win this game. But just based on them dealing with the same stuff, I don't have a lean yet. The only thing I have a lean on is based on no first-team reps as it stands. Last we heard from Anthony Richardson, I think Joe Flacco probably gets the start this week. What that does for you, I don't know.
I feel like for whatever reason, when I think about Jacksonville, the identity of the Jaguars, and I've covered a lot of games down there, as I mentioned, to me, the identity of the Jacksonville Jaguars is twofold. It's the fact that they own the Colts down there, and then secondly, it's a bunch of dudes that look like Tom Petty in cutoff jeans walking around that pool that is basically a petri dish, right?
What about your mascot friend?
I do like Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Jacksonville is cool. I'm down with that, right?
Can we stamp this as if not now when game for the Colts? Like they're 0-4, the Jaguars are reeling too, or do the Colts injuries offset that type of terminology for you?
No, I think I know that I'm being...
You know how hard it is to go a decade without accidentally stumbling into a win against a team in their building?
But it feels to me like when I think about it, I know it sounds crazy, but it feels like Jacksonville is as due to break their season streak as Indianapolis is to break this Jacksonville streak, right?
Yeah, and they're still a team that thinks they're a playoff team, and it's a game they absolutely have to have, if you're even entertaining that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, I know they're 0-4, but it doesn't feel like they are truly at the depths of an 0-4, because I think most people would assume that they would have gotten one by now.
Eddie brought up the Miami game. I brought up the Texans game. They could be 2-2.
They could. But they're 0-4, and they're looking to snap it. Chris Hinton, by the way, is a guy that didn't snap for the Colts, but was right next to those that did. One of the prolific players from the move from Baltimore to Indy, and he joins us next on Former Colt Friday here on Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. This was a top song in the year that Chris Hinton was drafted into the National Football League. And this is interesting because Chris Hinton, a native of Chicago, his high school, of course, not far from Gary, Indiana, where you would have found the birthplace and home of Michael Jackson, but also same high school as Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke, all kinds of greatness coming out of the high school of Chris Hinton in Chicago before he found his way to Northwestern. By the way, that is Wendell Phillips Academy High School. Prolific career at Northwestern led him to be drafted by the Denver Broncos, in which case then he passed John Elway in the air on his way to Baltimore, which would become Indianapolis in that trade that would lead him to a great career with the Colts. And he joins us now on Former Colt Friday on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Chris Hinton, it is a pleasure. How are you?
Good. I'm great. Thanks for having me. And the intro was nice. Wrapped up my whole life in like 30 seconds. That was awesome.
Well, thanks for joining us. That concludes today's conversation. No. Hey, let's begin with this. Here's how I recall it, Chris, and I want to know from your perspective what it was like, because in the early years of the Indianapolis Colts, first off, you had officials occasionally that would, say, holding, Baltimore, and the crowd in the dome would boo because everybody's like, no, it's Indianapolis. And Ron Stark and Chris Hinton were the two names that everybody around here kind of hung their hat on because the team wasn't very good, but we knew that there were two players that were amongst the best at their position. From your perspective, what is your recollection? And if it has anything to do with that, was that difficult?
I remember those early years like yesterday. The hype that surrounded the move. And then it just kind of like from that point, it just like fell off. From year after year, team not doing well. But when your punter and your offensive lineman are two of the better known guys on the team, that's a bad sign.
It is, yeah. But, no offense, but yes, that's probably accurate, right?
Yeah, but I remember from going from Baltimore to Indianapolis and just seeing the contrast and just the enthusiasm that the city of Indianapolis had for the Colts and leaving Baltimore, where you had your diehard Baltimore fans, but it was tough sledding there too, as far as just the backing of the fans.
What's your recollection of the move itself? I mean, not to go all the way to the way back, but how did you find out that all of a sudden you were going to have to find a place to live and you were going to be in Indianapolis, Indiana, which I guess was close to home, but what's your recollection of how you guys as players found out about that?
Well, I found out a friend of mine was working for the Chicago Tribune and saw it on the wire and called me. I was living in Baltimore at the time, and that's how I found out. And so that was April or whatever of '84. March, April, whatever. But I had just bought a place there like 6 months earlier. And that's when interest rates are like 13% and trying to sell a place that quickly. I sent money to closing. But that's how I found out. And then just started calling some of my teammates, and that's how other guys found out through me.
The narrative, Chris Hinton is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line as part of Former Colt Friday. And, of course, you are now not only an NFL dad and a Michigan dad, but a Northwestern alum who takes on Indiana. So we'll get to all that. I'm curious of this. The perception, Chris, is that in those early years that it was kind of chaos amongst the Colts because you had Bob Irsay was still very involved. There was a rotation, almost a revolving door of coaches from, everything from, Cush to Dowhauer. And, there was just a lot of change. And it felt like from the outside, it seemed as though there was no stability and it was just like WKRP in Cincinnati on a football field. Is that an accurate statement?
That's accurate. And it reminds me of the time, my first kind of introduction to the Colts organization was so after I was traded, and I literally I was in a dorm at Northwestern, and my agent tracked me down, told me go to a room where you can talk, and he told me that I was getting traded, and that's how I found out about the trade. And so being at Northwestern and actually close to where Bob Irsay lived, he invited my agent and myself out a couple weeks later to dinner, and we had a press conference. And the only media that was invited to the press conference was Jack Brickhouse from WGN, who was at the time the announcer for the Cubs.
Yeah. Hey, right? Hey with a home run, and yeah.
Yeah, everybody talks about Kerry. I mean, Jack Brickhouse was the guy growing up. But anyway, so Jack Brickhouse asked Bob, what position is Chris going to play? And I don't think he knew what position I played. His answer was the best position. I mean, I can't make that. I mean, that's what he said. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I looked at my age, and I was like, oh, shoot. What the heck is going on? And so, and then the move and just coming to Indianapolis and practicing at Fall Creek Middle School, preschool, whatever.
Yeah, elementary school right there at Kessler and Fall Creek. That's right. That's a good memory, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just everything was chaotic. It really was. I mean, you knew who was in charge, and but there are people that pretended to be in charge, but were not in charge. It was crazy.
So I'm assuming Bob Irsay was the guy that was in charge, but it probably depended hour to hour, right?
Yeah, from rumors, yeah. So unlike a lot of teams where you have a general manager who was truly like calling the shots. I mean, we didn't really have that. So,
Chris Hinton is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chris, I know that from a media standpoint and as a society, the way that we consume it was different then than it was now. But when you look back on that 83 draft class, I mean, it's viewed by many as one of the most hyped quarterback classes of all time. Obviously, you're involved in the Elway trade, but to have lived through that draft class, and not only to have lived through it, but to be a top 5 pick in that draft, when you look at all the stars that were in that class, what do you remember most about the lead up to that draft and your name? I know that the Elway to Marino 30 for 30 is one of my favorites. You're featured in that, talking about the trade. But what do you remember about the lead up to that draft?
Well, for me, to back it up a little bit, my junior year at Northwestern, I played tight end. So, and at that time, playing professional football was not, for me, it wasn't something that I was like losing any sleep over. I mean, I just didn't see it happening. So, going into spring ball, Dennis Green, who was the coach at Northwestern, called me in and told me he was moving me to offensive line, which at that point I thought it was like the dead end. And he told me that I could be a first round pick if I worked hard, which I didn't believe. But so, and I back up because everything just happened real fast for me. I mean, it was like, as they say, drinking water from a water hydrant. So basically within a year, I went from playing tight end to being the first offensive lineman taken in the draft and one of the greatest drafts ever. But I just remember going to, unlike now where there's one combine, back then there was like 3 or 4 combines, and then and so just meeting the guys and playing in a couple of all-star games and just seeing another side of college football versus being at Northwestern, where we went 4-40 in my 4 years. We lost 40 games. And so just being around those guys and getting to know the guys and then being the fourth player chosen. It was a lot real quick.
Hey, Chris, what better lifeline to get out of 4-40 than to get drafted by the Baltimore Colts, right? I mean, let's go. Not drafted by, but you know what I mean? I mean, by a guy that's going to put you at the best position, right?
I mean, because and I tell the story about being drafted by Denver, flying to Denver, and just like literally, I was like, back in the day when people couldn't actually come to the gates without having a ticket, coming off the plane and being mobbed by people, kids and parents with their kids and signing things and big press conference. And I mean, it was all the hype and get traded, a week later. And then I go to Baltimore and, I'm expecting the same thing. And I come off the plane and I never forget David Filer, who was an employee at the time. He was an intern. And I walk off the plane, and here's this intern. That's the only person that was waiting for me. Just says, "Hey, come on, let's go." I'm like, wow, it's a little different. So I knew then that the fan base in Denver was a little different than Baltimore, and vice versa.
When you were with the Colts, and obviously guard and tackle both, but I think just the left side in general. And I've always found it interesting that, people, Chris, can talk about what could have been if the Colts would have maintained John Elway. And then I think about it and I go, yeah, but his blind side would not have had the protection that quarterbacks here had, right? And then ironically enough, your departure from Indianapolis comes, and I've never understood this, where they package you and Andre Rison for the rights to draft Jeff George, and then poor Jeff George has no blindside protection and no, in his young receiver that he would have been throwing to is gone. So it almost seemed like it came full circle of just bizarre nature. What was your reaction when you found out you'd be leaving Indianapolis?
It was tough. I mean, it was tough because, like you said, being from Chicago, it was cool being close to home. Number one, and number two, I had really planted myself in the city of Indianapolis and had just built a home. And it was funny because before I built the home, I talked to Jimmy, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about building a house. Any chance I'll get traded?" And he's like, "Oh, no," but which was probably the case. But it was tough. And, it was like, here we go again, being traded for the rights of the number one pick in the draft, which is what happened. And but to your point, I think it showed how important an offensive line, and in particular a left tackle, is to a team. And, we see today after free agency how well that position is being paid. It's always one of the top 3 or 4 guys paid on the team.
I know your son, Christopher Hinton Jr., is with the Chargers, correct, on the defensive side of the ball, right?
That's correct.
And your second son is at Michigan currently. Do you still follow the Colts or, the NFL in general? And if so, and I know you played, obviously, with the Colts, the Falcons, and Vikings, but do you still get a chance to peek in on what the Colts are doing? You're obviously a member of the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I do, and I try to, like you say, with everything going on between the two boys, but, I try to, I watch more college football and have been for the last several years, but I do keep an eye on the Colts, and it's kind of cool because there's several players that on the team that I knew from whatever reason, Downs from Atlanta, Josh Downs he was in middle school with my boys, and so there's guys on the team that I have a connection with, Kwity Paye, who was playing, defensive line with Michigan. I got to know him quite well. So I do keep up, and people ask me, what team do you connect yourself with, and it's without a doubt, the Colts.
And by the way, speaking of Kwity Paye, just found out Kwity Paye, Kenny Moore, Jonathan Taylor, all ruled out by Shane Steichen for Sunday. We will get into that after our conversation here with Chris Hinton. Chris, in terms of the line itself, because you said that, you do, and Josh Downs has been a really good player, right, for their offense, but Bernhard Raimann is a guy that was drafted a year ago at that left tackle position. I've always felt like with offensive linemen, especially young ones, the less that we hear their name, the better it means they're probably doing. How long realistically does it take? And you're an interesting guy because you were able to go from the left side in Atlanta. You went to the right side. You were kind of Swiss Army knife at times. And I think people think that's an easy transition. But how long does it truly take for a left tackle to get acclimated to feeling rooted in exactly what it is that they need to do?
That's a great question. And, I go back to when I first came in the league as a rookie offensive lineman, and I was wondering if I could play. I mean, I literally during camp I was getting beat on a regular basis, and eventually I got moved to guard, and it was the best thing that ever happened because, especially having 1 year offensive line under my belt, but the transition it's tough. But, nowadays, guys are much more prepared to make the transition from college to pros. The coaching's better. Just the systems are more pro-like. Whereas, I was pretty green. And being able to play a year at guard and get acclimated to just the competition level was good for me.
What has been your impression? I know that you mentioned that you've watched Josh Downs a little bit because you've known him since he was a kid. What's been your impression so far of the quarterback play of Anthony Richardson?
I can't really speak on it knowledgeably. A lot of times it's highlights that I've seen. And so, I mean, based on highlights, it's like, wow. I mean, just the raw ability, his raw ability. I'm excited about his future and what he brings to the table. But yeah, I couldn't really put a finger on, other than highlights.
Chris, what do you, when you look back on your career, I mean, obviously the Ring of Honor, the All-Pro selections, the Pro Bowls, what do you look back on most fondly about?
When you talk to a lot of guys that played and former players, they talk. I feel the same way. I talk about the camaraderie and the locker room stuff, and I mean even to this, and at this point in my life, we're losing guys and have lost guys. Like Donnell Thompson, who just passed away.
Just passed, yeah.
And, a lot of my contemporaries, but man, I just look back and whenever I come to Indianapolis, the last couple of years with the Big Ten championship, I always reconnect with John Hand, and we end up talking about stories, locker room stuff from 30, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Wow. But that's the thing that that I remember. I'll always remember the Halloween game.
Oh yeah, best.
I was out visiting, out in L.A. visiting our son, and ended up spending some time with Eric Dickerson. And one of the first things we started talking about the Colts was the Halloween game. He
Chris,
could have gone for almost 400 yards that game if the pace that he was on.
He had 4 TDs. You guys won 55-23. At the time, it was the largest margin of victory in Monday Night Football history. And it was, for this city, to me, that game, more than any other, Chris, and that's crazy to say because there have been great teams that have happened since then. But for me, that was the game that cemented and finalized the marriage finally between it was no longer the Baltimore Colts at that point, and the city finally said, wow, we not only have an NFL team, we have a bona fide superstar in Dickerson, and everybody then kind of pushed all in. Did you feel that as a player? Did you feel that pride, and did you feel a pride in helping the franchise through its adolescent years into being cemented with the city?
Yeah, because I mean, it was, I get the chills just thinking about it because it was the big stage, and if I'm correct, I remember that was the first time that the Colts were on the Indianapolis Colts were on Monday Night Football
In Indy, correct? That's correct.
In Indy,
Yep.
and not only was it the first time, this is when Monday Night Football was Monday Night Football. I mean, this is when all the guys in the league were sitting around watching Monday Night Football. So your peers, it was your family. I mean, your families from all, members from all across the country who normally couldn't get regional games. And so it was it. And it was a way of the team being, we've arrived as far as just the big stage. And like you say, having, a player like Eric Dickerson and then, hey, Elway is that piece of the puzzle. And then just, anything that we did, I mean, went right that night. It was, the fans were just bonkers. It was amazing.
Okay, before we let you go, Chris, I want to play a little fact or fiction. I'm going to make a statement. You tell me whether it's fact or fiction in the opinion of Chris Hinton. You ready?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, here we go. Fact or fiction. Northwestern will be a contributor towards Indiana's quest towards an undefeated regular season in Curt Cignetti's debut campaign, as Indiana will make Northwestern victim number 6 here this weekend.
Oh, let's go with fact. I watched Indiana play against, was it UCLA maybe?
Correct. That's correct.
And they look pretty darn good.
Okay. All right. So then fact or fiction. Indiana will actually upend Michigan this year and your second oldest son and the Wolverines and continue their quest under Curt Cignetti towards moving their way into the college football playoff. Fact or fiction?
Blood is thicker than alma mater, and I'm going to go with fiction and go blue.
Okay. Fact or fiction? It is weird for Northwestern Wildcat Chris Hinton to say go blue when talking about the Michigan Wolverines.
That's fact.
Okay. Fact or fiction? Bob Irsay would occasionally call in plays that nobody knew what in the hell they meant when you were in the huddle standing on the field at the Hoosier Dome.
I don't know. Rumors. I don't know what happened there.
That's always been urban legend in Indianapolis that, like, all of a sudden Bob Irsay would call down from the press box and say, like, run this play, and everybody's like, well, what's going on here?
I've heard that, but I want to keep my name up in the stadium.
Okay, then lastly, fact or fiction? Chris Hinton should run for politics.
Let's go with fact.
It sounds like it, right? I love that. Hey, listen, I'll tell you this much. I'll take it one step further, and I've had this conversation with, amongst others, Mike Chappell, who I know you know. I do think that not only the Ring of Honor, but I think your name needs to be more heavily discussed just in terms of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because you were a great player here. You were a great soldier for the franchise. You were one that I think people took just a tremendous amount of pride. I can say, as somebody that grew up in this town, that Chris Hinton was a name that was just carried with such an amount of pride during the time that you were here, because we didn't have a lot before that Monday night game to push our chest out about, and you were absolutely one of them. And, I hope you hold the city and the franchise in the same regard that it holds you, because I think you are a highly respected and beloved figure of that franchise, and that's the reason your name's up there.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I will always feel a connection with the city of Indianapolis and the Colts organization. So I appreciate that. That means a lot.
Well, when you come back to town, I got bad news for you. Sports Bar and Safari Bar and those places that you guys might have hung out are no longer here, but you'll be welcome nonetheless anytime you come.
Don't tell me that.
That's how we know we're old, right?
St. Elmo's still kicking.
St. Elmo's is still there, Chris. St. Elmo's still there. Got a table for you, right?
There you go.
Chris, I appreciate it. Enjoy the games this weekend for Indiana and Northwestern. We'll see what happens there. And then, of course, best of luck to your son with the Chargers and also with the Michigan Wolverines. Appreciate the time today.
Hey, thank you, and go Colts, go Blue, go Cats.
All right, sounds good. That
All right, be
is
good.
the pride of Northwestern, as well as I mentioned, Wendell Phillips Academy High School in Chicago. Chris Hinton, a member of the Colts Ring of Honor. Really good stuff. Speaking of Wendell Phillips, that's a high school, of course. Kyle Neddenriep will be able to tell us about some of the high schools in central Indiana that are back under better weather conditions tonight. That conversation next to let you know what the big games are tonight on the gridiron on Query and Company. Thanks again to Chris Hinton. That interview will be available on the Podcast Center at 1075thefan.com. Good stuff. Love the story about Bob Irsay just saying he'll play the best position. There is one of the great excerpts, if you will, or bloopers that I have. When I worked at Channel 6, I would just sit after hours and just scan through old tapes. And there was one where Ed Sorensen was interviewing Andre Rison in his rookie year, which he's sitting there interviewing Andre Rison, and Bob Irsay came up, put his arm around Andre Rison and said, "Mr. Bentley, this guy, Albert Bentley, is the best running back in the NFL." and Ed and Andre Rison's eyes got the size of, like, Frisbees. And he and Ed both were like, and Ed's like, "Boss man, Mr. Irsay, this is actually Andre Rison." And he looks at Andre Rison and said, "I could have sworn this is Brooksy, Bill Brooksy," and now he's on to Bill Brooks. So he forgot that he thought it was Albert Bentley. I mean, it was just, and, a colorful character for sure, Bob Irsay, but just some of the stories you hear, and Jim Irsay, who I think has worked very, very hard to not fall into some of the traps of his father. Your heart goes out to Jim Irsay as well, because you can see in interviews, and I will applaud Jim Irsay for always being really pretty candid and pretty transparent just about some of the challenges of the later years of Bob Irsay and, the different things that plagued Bob Irsay after he had, his daughter, Jim Irsay's sister, had been killed in a car accident, and it just, things really kind of spiraled from there. But, to hear Chris Hinton talk about, Bob Irsay not knowing what position he played, it's funny, right? In hindsight, you look back and you can have a chuckle over it. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, he is with the Indianapolis Star. High school football Friday night once again. That means our conversation with Kyle Neddenriep and finding out what the marquee games are. So we'll get right to that, Kyle. Tonight you will be covering what matchup that's the big one tonight?
Big one tonight is Lawrence North and Warren Central, at Warren Central. So 2 6-0 teams and two kind of different teams, in a lot of ways, but, which makes it even more interesting matchup, I think, from that standpoint. But that should be a great one. And also Center Grove and Cathedral play at Marion. That should also be a fantastic game. And great atmosphere too, and knock on wood, I think we're going to have actually some decent weather for one of the rare nights on Fridays.
It's going to be great, right? I mean, it's supposed to be beautiful, right?
Yeah, it should be great. It should actually, I think it's going to cool down and feel like a nice fall football Friday night that we always look forward to.
Warren, you mentioned Warren Central, and we know, Kyle, how good they've been, in particular defensively for a team. And I realize in high school football you're getting new groups every 4 years, but they have been so offensively prolific at times with their great teams. They are great defensively. And one of the teams that on the other side of town, just because when I think of Warren, I think in my mind of this team. And I'll ask it, I guess, simplistically, what's going on with Ben Davis? Because they clearly have been off the mark of where they were thought to be at this point.
Yeah, and I had a chance to see him Saturday. I covered him a couple times this year, and they played Lawrence North. It was 11 a.m. start. It was, the atmosphere wasn't obviously what it would be on a Friday. It was kind of a weird game. It was 58-28, and you walk away from that like, man, I mean, and Mark Zachary, he had all 4 touchdowns for Ben Davis, but defensively, they had, and credit LN too. I mean, their offense is legit. They're top. I think they're ranked 6th in 6A, but I think they're probably better than that even. So they played a very good team, but to see Ben Davis struggle like that was surprising. And, that right now, and they've got some quarterback play that, inexperience and some talent there, but some inexperience and, and we knew coming off last year, we probably maybe should have, put more into this, but, they lost a ton of a really good senior class, beyond very good, one of the best they've had in recent years, and lost basically their whole linebacking crew from that group and a lot of leadership too. But, so maybe should have put more into that, but I wouldn't have expected 1-5 for sure. And and it'll be interesting tonight. They play Carmel and that'll be another tough game. Carmel's, I think, better than they've been. in the last couple of years. So, no easy one there either. But, you look at that schedule and, it's just tough. Look at the teams that they've lost to, and you don't expect them to lose to Avon, in overtime. That was a surprise. But, but then Cathedral, Center Grove, Warren, and LN, so they're all top, top 8 teams or 7 teams in the state. So there's no real let up, on that schedule. But I think it's just a combination. And then I think when you start losing a few games like you never have before, they haven't been 1-5 since 1974. So it's just, I think maybe some confidence things have kind of crept in as well. But, they've had some trouble, defensively, and then, I think, just some things on offense that haven't fully clicked, being able to finish drives and things like that. But they're still a team, when I look at what the sectional is going to look like, I wouldn't want to see them, because Mark Zachary's going to be out there, and Elijah Price, who's a fantastic running back, he's going to be out there too. So, it's not, they're going to be a scary, whatever their record is, they're going to be scary, I think, for anybody that sees them in the sectional. But it hasn't fully come together for them so far this year. And then part of that's, the teams they're playing too are pretty good.
Kyle Neddenriep of the Indy Star joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Kyle, what teams amongst those that are, in that 5-2 mark or perhaps 6-0 mark, looking for 5-1 mark, I guess it would be, into Week 7 that have surprised you? We obviously know those that were projected to be really good this year, but what have been the surprise stories of those that have had maybe better than anticipated campaigns?
Well, I think most people would probably be Lawrence North is probably a team that, when you talk about the blue blood programs, you think of them probably more for basketball, to be honest, than you do for football. And, when you look at what they've done so far, I don't know if, surprise is necessarily probably, they were 7-4 last year and had a good season and brought a lot back. But, them being 6-0 going into this Warren game, I think probably, turns your head a little bit. And their toughest games, here this week, they beat Ben Davis obviously last week, and then Warren and Center Grove here the next 2 weeks. So, staying undefeated, that would really say something about where they're at as a program. But I do, Pat Mallory, talking to him Saturday, he's been there 12 years now, and it was a lot of struggle, early on in his tenure there. They were 0-9 and 1-9 and, whatever else they were. They didn't win. They didn't have a winning season until the COVID season of 2020. And they won 7 games that year and then won a sectional for the first time in 31 years the next season. And so it's been this kind of a steady climb for them. And, I know he really loves this team, in particular the senior class that, I think, has bought into the work ethic and everything it takes to compete at this level of 6A football. So they would probably fit that. I think most of the other teams you look at in 6A are teams that you normally see in that stratosphere, so to speak. But, I just think this year there's no real dominant team. There's no real, runaway team in 6A. So I think that'll make it fun. I think Martinsville's another team that may fit that slightly. I mean, I think we knew going in they were going to be really good, but they're 6-0. They've been an exciting team. They came back from 35 down on Decatur, which you don't never see that. They beat Whiteland last week, who's annually one of the best teams in the mid-state and really all of 5A. So they've got a good thing going. They've got a real good path too to make a pretty deep run in Class 4A. So they might fit that bill as well. But yeah, those are a few I'd say.
Kyle Neddenriep, Indianapolis Star. Again, the other big one we're watching, Shortridge and Crispus Attucks tonight, by the way. I've got my eye on the Blue Devils, have all season. Always want to mention them each week. And again, Kyle, you said Lawrence North and Warren Central, correct?
That's right. It'll be over there on the east side. And like I said, Ellen's offense against Warren's defense will definitely be a whole lot of fun tonight.
All right, and the weather's going to be good, so enjoy it, and we will talk to you again next Friday, taking a look at the games that happened tonight and forecasting what happens next week. Kyle, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Kyle Neddenriep on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line from the Indianapolis Star. Up next, right now, 239-1070, we have tickets to give away, and they went on sale this morning, and I'm telling you right now, they are already right now, between now and February 8th of 25, the hottest ticket you're going to get in town. Billy Joel and Sting at Lucas Oil Stadium. We got a pair to give away. We're going to do it with a Billy Joel trivia question, and we're going to do it next. So 239-1070 to get in line right now. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. I have in front of me a few Billy Joel trivia questions. I'm the judge and jury, by the way, on what is the correct answer for these. And I'm going to give the question to the caller. If you get it right, you are on your way to see Billy Joel along with Sting on February 8th. Tickets went on sale this morning from Live Nation. That's going to be at Lucas Oil Stadium. Eddie, I will let you two determine who we go with first here.
I'll let Jimmy pick.
All right, let's go with caller 3. Colts are going for win number 3. Let's do that.
All right, that would be Ed who joins us. Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm not. It's a beautiful day out, Ed, right? I want to send you to Billy Joel. Here's what I'm going to do, Ed. You ready?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you 4 songs, and I want you off the top of your head to tell me, of the 4, only one of these 4 went number 1 on the Billboard charts for Billy Joel. I want you to tell me which one it is, okay? One of these 4 went number 1. Tell Her About It, My Life, Uptown Girl, and Piano Man. Which one was number 1?
Piano Man.
Okay, I appreciate the call in and the guess. Unfortunately, not correct, Ed. Let's go to Jeff up next. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. All right, Jeff, I'm going to name for you 4 albums from Billy Joel. I want you to tell me which one came out first, okay?
All right.
An Innocent Man, Glass Houses, The Stranger, or 52nd Street? Which was the first of those 4 to be released? An Innocent Man, Glass Houses, The Stranger, or 52nd Street?
The Stranger.
Jeff, have you ever met Billy Joel?
No.
So that would make him the stranger to you, but guess what? You're going to have your chance to do it on February 8th. You are on your way, my man. The Stranger is indeed correct. Yeah, that no buzzer, Eddie. We need to correct. The Stranger is correct. By the way, and Jeff, we will get your information and send you on the way. Piano Man, believe it or not, peaked at number 25 on the Billboard chart. Of the songs that I mentioned, Tell Her About It, My Life, and Uptown Girl, which one do you think Jimmy Cook went number 1?
I would have gone to My Life.
Eddie, you have a guess?
Uptown Girl.
It is the last to be selected. Tell Her About It went number 1. Those other 2 went number 3. Piano Man was number 25. But I'm impressed that Jeff knew that from The Stranger. How about this, Jimmy? Within 2 years either side of it, can you tell me the age of Billy Joel without looking? Show's over at
68.
3. Eddie?
I was going to say 64.
This is surprising. 75.
Really?
75-year-old Billy Joel. Still brings it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Native of New York City.
Just released a new song earlier this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's and matter of fact, and I think it's off of his new album, but when Richard the janitor, Richard Goodlett, was that his last name?
Goodall,
thank you. Richard Goodall. When Richard Goodall of Terre Haute first went on America's Got Talent and did his performance, the music that played in the background of that, kind of in the montage, if you will, of his moment, was a Billy Joel song, and I believe it's a newer Billy Joel song. And so he is still doing it and doing it at a very, very high level. It's going to be a great show. And I've looked. I'm assuming that tickets went quickly when they went on sale. I believe maybe they still are on sale in terms of the primary, the first-run market for Sting and Billy Joel, but absolutely would be a very good show. We need to get to this, Jimmy. There is, because Kevin Bowen's going to join us coming up in just a couple minutes, but we now know definitively, we mentioned it earlier, give us again those who are definitely out for Sunday for the Colts.
Yeah, no Kwity Paye, no Jonathan Taylor, and then Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong on this, no Kenny Moore as well. All 3 declared out.
Correct.
There you go. So that swings a lot of different things in terms of this matchup. Jacksonville's 0-4, but like I mentioned, they showed promise against the Texans. It worries me losing those 2 key defensive weapons in Paye and Moore going into this Sunday.
Here's a question that I'm going to ask Kevin Bowen when he joins us coming up in the program here in a couple of minutes. In any way, shape, or form, does the absence of Jonathan Taylor impact the decision on playing Anthony Richardson?
No, I think the decision on Anthony Richardson should be solely based on health. I get the argument for why it could, because it's a safety net.
No. Okay, let me rephrase that. Do you let him go at a smaller percentage under 100 or at a, further from 100% if Jonathan Taylor's out there where you would not have having that safety net behind him? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. But I think it's, in some ways, my answer has to be the same, which is that no, I wouldn't let Jonathan Taylor's status impact the percentage at which you would be willing to let Anthony Richardson go. If anything, if Anthony Richardson has a clean bill of health, it would encourage me to put him out there because you have less of a safety net to lean on because JT's not there. I want to see pure Anthony Richardson.
And the other thing, Kwity Paye not being in there, that's an area where I guess yin and yang, good news, bad news. The good news is they have shown, to Chris Ballard's credit, a little bit of depth in terms of their line. The bad news is that depth already has been dipped into. But that offensive line for Jacksonville is porous, and one would think that you are able to take advantage of that even if you don't have your primary guys out there. Those are among the topics we will talk about with Kevin Bowen, of course, from the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, who joins us next. Straight up 2 o'clock in Indianapolis. For that matter, it's straight up 2 o'clock everywhere in the Eastern time zone. On this Friday, joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, you hear him in the morning with Andy Sweeney on the wake-up call with KB and Andy. And let's get right to this. Now, first off, turn down your radio, please, Kevin. Okay, there we go. All right, Kevin Bowen, I want to get to this first and foremost. If you are, and you're probably on your phone, it sounds like you're driving, so maybe you can't look at this. I'm curious what time I allegedly called you this morning.
Yeah, I would have to. I don't 8:22, 8:18, something. I think we just hung up with Greg Rakestraw. Yeah, so probably right around there, 8:19.
Okay, 8:21 a.m. I have a missed call from you and a voicemail. And the voicemail is an automated thing saying, like, please hang up. Da, da, da. So we have determined now that whoever is doing this with some sort of a third-party app, they can surrender because we now know that we're being punked, and it is kind of funny, but, like, it's gotten old, right? Is that safe?
We're getting duped. We're getting punked. It's Russia. It's China. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Are you on the TikTok, Kevin?
I created one a couple of years ago.
There we go.
There we go. I don't think I've posted on TikTok
I'm telling you,
in at least 12 months.
It's China with the TikTok. That's what it is. Okay. We now know, and go ahead and give us the names of who's out for Sunday and who we're keeping an eye on for Sunday.
Kenny Moore, Kwity Paye, Jonathan Taylor, those three were ruled out today. Anthony Richardson, Ryan Kelly. Those would be the two that I am watching. Kelly hasn't practiced unless he went today, which I don't think he was going. That's 5 straight days he's been out with a neck injury. That usually is not a good sign, so could be looking at Tanner Bortolini for a second straight game. And then Richardson. If you want to be optimistic about Richardson, he has practiced every single day this week. I would say it's pretty rare for a guy to practice all 3 days in a week and miss that game, especially when his absence is, I guess he left the game early, but it's not like this is Josh Downs with, a month-long absence or whatever. But again, as far as I have seen with Richardson, it has been limited, very limited in the open media session. So right now, if you made me pick, I would say it's Joe Flacco swinging the pigskin for the Colts on Sunday.
Kevin, is that because of trends by Shane Steichen, or are you like me where I look around the league and generally speaking, especially at that position, if you're not taking any first-team reps, I tend to lean to the guy that has, especially on a Friday, last day of practice?
Well, certainly nothing Shane Steichen has said. I would argue.
No, I meant like body of work over the last year, not like what he said publicly. I just mean like his routine with injured players and whether or not they've had first-team reps or not. Are you basing it on his trends, or are you basing that just on general rule of thumb around the league like I am?
I would say my eyes, if I can be totally honest. Yeah, I mean, I think what I've observed Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at practice, he has shown no signs to me that he's a starting quarterback on Sunday. Shane Steichen, this is actually kind of foreign territory for us with Shane. We haven't had unless I'm missing something, I don't think we've had up-in-the-air quarterback decisions last year. It was either pretty cut and dry. It was either Minshew or Richardson. Richardson was in concussion protocol one of those weeks. That's pretty, obviously cut and dry with the protocol. And then, after that, it was, all Minshew. I can't recall Minshew ever missing practice time last year. So, yeah, I would say, I guess, when we're out there for the open media portion, it's Flacco throwing at the starting guys, and then it's Ellinger. And so I would guess maybe a third quarterback, dressing situation for Richardson like Ellinger has done the first 3 weeks. Maybe that's what he does. So unless, we go inside and all of a sudden Anthony Richardson – puts on the Superman cape and starts taking all these.
Did we lose Kevin?
Maybe he's calling you again.
That's right. He might be calling me again. Eddie, do we know if we lost Kevin? There we go.
You guys got me?
There we go, yeah. Kevin, let me ask you this. Somebody asked me this question. I think it's a good one. A lot of hypotheticals here, but to simplify it, let's say Flacco plays this week and the Colts win. And let's say all of a sudden, and let's say even, Houston loses. But if the Colts suddenly find themselves where the division is back into play and Flacco has now started and finished 2 games in a row for them and they're winning, Do you agree with me that it's irrelevant? So long as Anthony Richardson is able to go, regardless of what happens, there is zero quarterback controversy.
Yeah, I think that's how they view it internally. Yes, I would agree.
This year is about, to me, the development of Anthony Richardson prioritizes over anything in terms of this year's win-loss. Does that make sense?
Right, but I certainly can hear people out on the other side of it. I mean, it's awkward, when you have one division title in a decade and, you've only won one playoff game in that time frame as well. I get why people, ask the other side of that question about, wait a minute, this should be win now. You returned all these starters and, et cetera, et cetera. Richardson hasn't earned the right, maybe necessarily if you wanted to go down that route to have it, but they sent a pretty loud and clear message indirectly, I guess, more so than their words when they drafted him 4th overall. And, I've always been a believer in, you look at, Jimmy's Chiefs or certainly the Bills or the Ravens, you find teams in the AFC that have had, this decently long run of success, however you want to label it, 5, 6, 7 years, all 3 of those teams have found that quarterback and have stuck with that quarterback. So, that's how I kind of look at the situation. And, this injury, it doesn't appear to be a long-term thing. Maybe if all of a sudden, it turned into kind of a month ordeal, perhaps that would be a little bit of a different tone to it. But, again, even if Richardson misses Sunday, it looks like he could be, back out there for the Tennessee game. So, that's why I look at it.
Kevin, of the guys that are not playing, and we know now, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, Kwity Paye, Kenny Moore. We mentioned this earlier, Jimmy and I, but I'm curious your opinion on this. The one that actually is the biggest blow to them would be which? Which one's the hardest to replicate? Taylor is the obvious answer here, I guess, but we don't know at the quarterback position how much they're going to rely on the run, if you will. So maybe you take that one off the board. But Paye and Moore, I guess, if you go between those two, which is the one that is more easy to soften the loss?
Boy, I think you can make pretty strong debates for all 3 of them, really. I mean, yes, running back is the easiest position in my mind to replace, but Taylor is a home run hitter, and if you do have to go to your backup quarterback, you would think you would want, a dynamic skill player in the backfield with him. As far as Paye and Moore, at defensive end right now, Samson Ebicom and Tyquan Lewis are both on injured reserve. So, Kwity Paye theoretically would mean a lot there. And then lastly, Kenny is such an important corner. I still think it's been a little masked, but I think the secondary has still had, a decent amount of struggles this season in regards to the pass game. And Christian Kirk is a really solid slot wideout for Jacksonville, and that's obviously what Kenny excels in. So, boy, that make me pick. I guess I would go with Kenny Moore, but again, I think you make pretty strong debates for all 3 of them.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. You hear him on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, 7 to 10 a.m. on these very airwaves. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter at KBowen1070 all Colts season long for his coverage. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Kevin, this week I've given a lot of credit to the way that Jacksonville started to get a little bit of traction offensively. Admittedly, the bar was pretty low the last couple weeks, but they looked like a better team against Houston. Eddie and I went into this earlier in the show. You could make the argument if things go differently against the Dolphins. I know you can do this with every team, but if they go differently against the Dolphins and they're able to hold on against Houston, this is a 2-2 team that is right where many thought they'd be this year in the hunt for the AFC South title. When you look at Jacksonville, am I overselling them, or what they just did last week, albeit in a loss, combined with the loss of Paye and the loss of Moore, this matchup scares me a lot more than it did a couple of days ago?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you on that. Last year the Colts played Carolina and New England back-to-back weeks, and, they were really stinky, really, really bad. I don't view 0-4 Jacksonville like that. Now, maybe this will be the trend all season long, but, again, I just don't see it quite like that with them just yet. Now, I do think they're in a very fragile state, though, and if you're able to jump on them early, I think that could get a lot of chirping, not only from the crowds, but even potentially from that sideline. With Doug Peterson sitting the trifecta in 1 week, answering questions on if he's lost the locker room, if they should make play calling changes, and if his job if his seat is warm, that's never a good thing. So, and not to mention, there's obviously major quarterback questions with them right now with how bad Trevor Lawrence has played here, dating back to late last season. So they do, I think, possess a decent amount of talent. I still think that. They have a couple notable injuries on defense, so that probably is worth a little bit monitoring. But when I see the Vegas line of Jacksonville's slight favorite, I don't think that's like the most shocking thing in the world.
Do you look at Jacksonville's receiving core and especially the game last week that Brian Thomas Jr. is able to put together? When you look at that, do you see red flags with this Colts secondary with Kenny Morneau off the table, or do you think this is a welcome challenge for a combination of Christian Kirk and a rookie wide receiver who's coming off a really nice game?
Yeah, again, I think their skill group is pretty deep. We'll see about Evan Ingram, their tight end, coming up later today. But, he was fourth in the entire NFL last year in catches. That includes wideouts. So, I think with Christian Kirk, and I know Gabe Davis hasn't done much this year, but with him and Brian Thomas, like you mentioned, I think that's a nice group. And Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, I think are a decent, 1-2 punch there at running back. So that's where, I do think there's some real fear here of, if you look at the Colts, their D-line and their corner group, very banged up. And so that's going to be tested big time here coming up on Sunday. It's, really it's just been Lawrence's wild inaccuracy. Right now, if Anthony Richardson were to start, it would be the two worst completion percentage quarterbacks in the NFL through the first 4 weeks of the season facing off here. So, to me, that is the bigger question of, can Lawrence settle down? And, he's had great success against the Colts. He's 70% guy and 9 touchdowns and 2 picks. Well, seeing that familiar jersey on the other sideline, get him back on track.
And, Kevin, based on that, would it behoove the Colts to just get aggressive defensively early? I know that you've got, the Colts are a little bit depleted in that line, but they still have players there, right? They still have guys that can get after Lawrence. Wouldn't it be wise of them to just basically bring the kitchen sink, certainly at the outset of that game, and set a tone early to keep Lawrence unnerved?
Yeah, I think there's when games like this pop up on the schedule, 0-4 football team that, again, they're having to ask or answer all these questions about their locker room and their head coach and their quarterback. I label these games as you give no hope. As soon as you give hope to these teams, now they believe. I think you saw that last year with the Falcons on Christmas. That was a team that had plenty of question marks. Ended up, of course, firing their head coach, and they settled in that game early, and now they believed in front of 500 fans. That's how I view Jacksonville on Sunday. I forget, all these meetings run together at this point. I forget which one it was. I think it was the Carson Wentz win and get in season finale a few years ago. But that was a game that Jacksonville was heading towards the number 1 pick, and I think Lawrence was 7 for 7 or 8 for 8 on the opening drive. And it was oh boy, now all of a sudden he believes, they score, they're leading, and now, the Caribbean vacation can be pushed to the back burner for a couple more hours. So to me, this is just a big time, again, give them no hope. And if you're able to jump on them early, like I said, I think that crowd, whatever crowd there is in the rain, is chirping a bit. The sideline starts chirping a bit. And I think, potentially you can put them away. If you don't do that early, then I think you got a ball game on your hands.
Why were there so many struggles defensively in the second half for the Colts? And is that something that worries you in a matchup like this against Jacksonville? To clarify, the second half against Pittsburgh, what I should have said. But why were there struggles there against Pittsburgh in the second half, and is that repeatable for Jacksonville?
Well, I just think that's honestly the trend we've seen in the first 4 weeks, Jimmy. I don't believe that we've focused on it a whole lot just because, the run defense was historically bad early on. You've had the Richardson roller coaster to start, and then, his issues, and now the injury, and Taylor's injury. You kind of got to rank the things that you talk about, and if you look at it, Caleb Williams, I don't believe has had a game over 200 yards yet besides the Colts, and he had, 350, I think it was, against them. C.J. Stroud, one of the more efficient games of his career, week 1, and, of course, Malik Willis was, very accurate in a brief throwing period against you week 2, and then Justin Fields has the second highest yardage day of his career. So, yeah, again, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think the secondary is kind of what we thought. Now, guys like Nick Cross have played pretty well, but, Jalen Jones has had a player too, but the overall playmaking in that secondary has lacked, and I just think in general they've given up a lot of yardage. So that's kind of what we thought would happen entering the season, and whether it's the second half against Justin Fields or, really what we've seen for the most part throughout the first 16 quarters of the season, that's probably been what I thought we would see.
Kevin, I've been waiting patiently. I've been waiting. And I haven't had maybe it happened and I slept on it. Entirely possible. I don't know if it was on the morning show or yet that I've been anticipating it in this conversation, but like no love for me guaranteeing that your Notre Dame Fighting Irish would beat Louisville and then it comes to fruition. I mean, the confidence that I had in your team, the clairvoyance that I had, you guys were doubters. You guys were haters on Notre Dame, and I'm like, no. No problem, no sweat. Louisville fraud, Notre Dame good, no problem.
I still have concerns about Riley Leonard. Kevin,
come on. No love here?
Yeah, I think Vegas had him as a touchdown favorite, so I don't know if you're staunch backing of Notre Dame and quite the game against Louisville, if I'm going to give you too much credit on that end.
But you were very apprehensive to accept that level of confidence.
Yeah, to me it screamed a jQuery backdoor on Monday morning of a let's build Notre Dame up so we can really rip them down if they lose there. So this was a missed opportunity. I have a feeling you might drum one up again, maybe Florida State, maybe Navy later in the year. You might go down that path here. So I've seen your Notre Dame allegiance before, so it smells fishy to me.
Listen, let me tell you something. Florida State, who Clemson has this week, and who knows, it's down there, so you never know. DJ Uyunglele is terrible. Like, I mean, I realize nobody around here cares, but you saw him against Notre Dame, what he could do when he was at Clemson filling in the COVID game, and that was literally his one college highlight. At what point are people going to start buying the fool's gold of transfer quarterbacks?
Wait,
Kevin?
So you're saying that he's got a get-right game with Notre Dame upcoming on the schedule?
No,
that's
I'm telling you. He is.
No, I know. He's very bad.
He's brutal.
He's very bad.
He's absolutely. Who does Notre Dame have this week?
A bye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Much needed.
Indeed.
They'll win that, too. I'm just telling you.
Yes.
Bring him young
a
Eastern,
lot of people
right?
don't know this, but stitched in the jQuery backpack, God Country Notre Dame. It's shocking,
That's right.
but it's.
I told you I had a
close-knit
70-pound
secret.
liver spot poke me in the chest after the USC push game, wearing a sweatshirt that said exactly that. Kevin, has your son done the big pick yet this week?
Yes, he has. My wife is supposed to be editing the video here soon, and then we'll send it out. But as you would certainly fall in line with, what's on the side of the Jags helmet?
That'd be a big Jaguar.
First animal of the year. We weren't born yesterday.
I see.
Two-year-old boy sees an animal on anything. What do you think he's going to do?
Now,
Are you breaking out the throwback helmets? Because they're using the throwback Jaguar helmets this weekend.
I know, which I love. And, Tom Coughlin. Can we get some frozen snot when they show Tom Coughlin on Sunday? Can we get, just a picture of him, just a little frozen snot on him like he's the Giants head coach again. Sounds like Jacksonville's pulling it all out. There's
When you think
guys
old school Jags, who do you think of? Jimmy, go.
I mean, well, for me, my childhood's Maurice Jones-Drew, but that's
Okay.
not that old, right?
Kevin, go.
Yeah, Leftwich, certainly.
That's a
Mark
good one.
Brunell and Keenan McCardell, if I could go way back.
I'd go Tony Baselli.
Nice.
Sure.
I don't know why.
Josh Scobie, banging in field goals.
Gosh, I forgot about him. Yeah, that dude would hit from anywhere. Your son's record so far, and for those that are unfamiliar with it, Kevin has his son walk up on 2 plastic helmets, the Colts, and then whoever they're playing that week, whichever his son picks up, that is his prediction for the week. His record so far this year is what?
1-3. Certainly, I think caught reading the press clippings a bit too much after last season, 11-6. So, yeah, it's been a look in the mirror moment for him through the first quarter of the season. September does not define you, is what I've told him.
That's what I'm trying to say about my fantasy team.
That should be the name of your fantasy football team.
September doesn't define you. I'll
September
change it
doesn't
right
define
now.
me, yeah. All right, Kevin, enjoy it this weekend. Enjoy having an off week of watching Notre Dame. If you get time, come down tomorrow to German Fest. You can watch the Dachshund Dash, also known as the Wiener Dog races. Lindsay and I will be doing the commentary and play-by-play. You can join the Stein. You can join the brat eating competition, Kevin. I got a feeling you might be a ringer.
Look at that. Boy, what a beautiful weather for that.
Perfect. Just perfect, right? right in front of the Anthonyum at the Rascal are going to be awesome. So
I might have to stop by.
come on down. We'll get you a brat and a cold beer, and we appreciate it as always. Talk to you soon, all right?
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right, Kevin Bowen joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. In terms of a couple of things to unpack there. First off, in terms of his son, that's becoming a challenge now that his son is a little bit more aware of the picks themselves. Now, when you say the Jaguars throwback helmets, I'm going to show my ignorance here, my naivete. I remember they had, their helmets now are all black with the Jaguar on the side, right?
And it's got like the Jaguars' eyes are a different color. Like they changed, they fine-tuned some
Remember
things in
they
that
had
regard.
the one helmet for a couple of years. It seems like it was 5 or 6 years ago. It was like a helmet mullet. Like it was like gold up front.
Yeah.
And then party in the back. It was like black in the back. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Those were awful. So what exactly is their throwback?
They call this their Prowler helmet. It's the original Jaguar logo that they used back in '95. It's a black helmet with a Jaguar with a turquoise tongue, no weird like different colored eyes, just black eyes, and it's got the teeth. It looks very angry, very vicious. I'm showing it to Jake.
Okay.
This is admittedly bad for the
that's
audio audience, but
that's
that is
the original
throwback.
one. And then what's today's look like?
Today's Jaguars logo, I'll have to pull
So
up on
this
the
is
side.
more of a pouncing Jaguar in terms of the old school one.
So that's more of today's Jaguars logo. The eyes are turquoise. They emphasize more on the nose. The color's a little more mustardy, I guess, the Jaguar is colored than it is. So
if you have to explain the subtle differences, then it probably is indicative of the fact that you don't have like the richest throwback.
I'm not going to argue you on that. They've only been around since '95. That's my existence, right? So I'm not saying it's true throwback format. You can tell, and I was frustrated with it at the time. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I like the original Jaguar.
Yeah, it's cool.
We don't need to add turquoise eyes to him. Let him be him.
The Jacksonville Jaguars, to me, and I'm sure that there was more that goes into this, but it feels like kind of an NFL swing and a miss in terms of I think they were banking on that market or that region growing more so than it actually did.
Are you talking about placing the franchise there or the name?
Correct, yeah.
Because the name, that always bugs me when the name of the team doesn't really regionally identify. And I get it, to be fair, like the Colts made more sense in Baltimore because of Pimlico and because of horse racing up there. But Jaguars make sense. There's some expansion teams where it's like, what are we doing? But you talk about just the market
saying
selection.
Putting a team in Jacksonville does feel in hindsight like if they had a do-over there, I would think that they would go. But then again, I mean, Austin, Texas is the easy answer, but there are already San Antonio probably would be your answer. And I can tell you right now, factually, another one where I will sit and die on this hill. The New Orleans Saints were lock, stock, and barrel set to go to San Antonio and become the San Antonio Saints. And then Katrina happened. And based on the emotion and the significance of the franchise, they went ahead and renovated the Superdome or the Mercedes-Benz Dome or whatever and kept them in New Orleans. But they absolutely would have been San Antonio. And they were moving, and they were going to play in the Alamodome in San Antonio and become the San Antonio Saints. And that storm, as terrible as it was and as awful as it was, the one, I guess, positive for the city of New Orleans to come out of that was it kept the Saints in New Orleans.
Well, it's not like they're actively trying to move the Jags to London or anything. So
that's right. Yeah, they'll.
Where are their next two games?
The cows come home, right?
My bad.
It is a feel-good Friday from Franciscan Health. Got a good story, and it does involve the Indianapolis Colts. It's next. It's a Friday. It is halfway through the 2 o'clock hour. You know what that means. It is a feel-good Friday brought to you by the great folks at Franciscan Health. By the way, just got another one this week. Hey, Jake, I had my heart scan done. It was simple, and the results are good. And what a relief, right, to just know. And if you're curious what a heart scan does, and I understand that, why you would be curious or say, Jake, I've heard about a heart scan, but I'm not sure exactly what that means. Non-invasive. You go in. Think of it kind of like an MRI. And by that, I mean it takes maybe 10 minutes. But what a heart scan does is it takes a look at your heart itself and just in terms of the arteries in your heart to find out what the level of, and in particular, like calcium blockage would be throughout your heart. And that gives you an idea then of what your risk would be, whether or not it's important to go in and get like an angioplasty or just kind of open up those veins or medication, whatever it might be. But you get a score, and with it you also get kind of an assessment of where your heart health and the risk for heart issues lie for you. Sounds obviously complex, but it's really pretty simple, and I do think it's important. And every so often, probably every 3 or 4 times that I do this segment, I'm going to again remind people of this because I know that you're tuning in to hear the latest on the Colts and all that, and I appreciate and understand and all of that. As I've mentioned before, and you'll get tired of hearing me say it, but when you have a massive heart attack and you survive a massive heart attack, you have a 50-50, quite frankly. 50% of your emotion is this incredible gratitude that you survived it. And then 50% of it, truthfully, especially in that moment, sometimes I've got to go back to the moment to remind myself of this, but you do feel a survivor guilt. You really do, because I think to myself of the number of people that didn't make it out of that room, and they certainly, I'm no better than any of those folks. That goes without saying, but you wonder how it is that you made it out of the room, and I don't know that I'll ever know that answer, except for that I knew the second that I walked out that I had a responsibility to just simply do what I could to make people aware of and proactive about their heart health. And again, I'm going to go back to when I had my heart attack, my left arm went numb instantly. And it was not a, wow, that feels like a weird tingle. It was an instant, like there was no mistaking what it was. And I was very fortunate that I was extremely close to the ER and got in, and they got the angioplasty in me and put a stent in me to open my heart back up. But I had a 100% blockage. I started sweating profusely, and I then started to feel nauseous. But if this happens to you or you are experiencing it, the number one thing I would tell you is to call an ambulance as opposed to driving, because when an ambulance comes, they will call ahead and get the process going on opening up the cath lab to get you in immediately. But they also will be able to put in you the blood thinners to allow any small trickle of blood to get through to get the oxygen to the areas it's necessary within you. So that it's really important to me that people understand just that exact same thing. And the symptom itself, if you feel like there's a question that something might be happening, it probably is. And you need to react to that. Number 1 heart program for Indiana, by the way, for cardiology by Health Grades. Number 1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery by Care Checks. I'm talking about Franciscan Health. And their affordable heart scans, just $49. Think about that, just $49. You can pay out of pocket. You get a free heart health risk assessment included with every screening. And you go in, exactly what I was just talking about. You can't afford to not get the scan. It's simple, it's easy, and especially if you have one of the risk factors when it comes to heart health. And I'm talking about if you were a former or current smoker, if you have a family heart history like I did, a family history of heart disease, then you can go in and get that scan at Franciscan Health, but you should do it regardless, especially if you were over the age of 40. Each and every week, we bring you in. By the way, if you want to get that scan, easiest thing to do is to simply Google Franciscan Health and heart scan, but it's franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. Each and every week, a different story that I find throughout the course of the week that I think, you know what, kind of made my heart feel good to see that. Like, for example, the story that I came across this week, take 15-year-old Gwen DePerna. Now, Gwen, from the time that Gwen DePerna was just a baby, dreamed about playing football, dreamed about being involved in sports. And sometimes, I dreamed, for example, that I was going to be a quarterback someday. And I remember the first time that I tried to throw football with a shoulder pad on, I'm like, wait a minute, this is a totally different rotation. Realized very quickly my future was not in football at the quarterback position. But I was still able to enjoy and play football. Many students like Gwen might have felt like, due to some disabilities that they have, or simply we'll say differences that they have, that football was not going to be a possibility for them. But Gwen, like many, found out about Unified Sports, which we talked about before, which partnered with Special Olympics recently and allowed for students from Washington, Zionsville, Fishers, and Arsenal Technical High School to go out and enjoy flag football through Unified Sports at the Colts complex earlier this week. Now, how cool is that, first off, that you grow up in Indianapolis and you're like, hey, I'm going to play flag football, but I'm not just going to play it out in the park. I'm not just going to play it at my school. I'm going to get to go to the actual practice facility where Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor and DeForest Buckner and Kwity Paye are practicing throughout the course of the year. And I'm going to do it in an environment that is welcoming to me, that is making me feel part of the team, and as Gwen said, where I'm going to score as many touchdowns as I can because I've always dreamed about playing football. And that's the beauty of Unified Sports, which is now in 50 different schools throughout the state of Indiana, and for the Colts to be able to bring these students that partner those that have those challenges with varsity athletes from the respective schools so that they all are encompassing. You've heard me talk a lot about Unified Sports. Ben Davis and Carmel also were participants in this and have been in the future in the Unified Sports out of the Colts complex. But this is the other thing I love about it. The Colts and the Indiana Special Olympics, when they saw this, said, you know what, we can go one step further. And they wanted to make sure that not only were they bringing the athletes from Special Olympics and Unified Sports and the varsity athletes from Washington, Zionsville, Fishers, Indianapolis, Arsenal Technical, but they also said, you know what? What does every athlete need? What does Gwen need? What does any football, basketball, baseball player not need, but enjoy? People to cheer them on. So they expanded the Unified Sports to also involve cheerleaders. And so those girls that had dreamed of being cheerleaders, those girls that are involved with the special education programs or the programs at their school and see the cheerleaders that are on the sidelines, they got their opportunity to do the same by becoming Unified Sports cheerleaders as well. So you then had those students, not just the cheerleaders from those schools, but working with those kids that were also getting that opportunity. And afterwards, when asked about it, one of the cheerleaders was asked who won. And you know what was funny? She couldn't actually answer because she wasn't sure. That's because when it comes to this sort of an initiative and this sort of opportunity for these young students at those schools, everybody wins in a situation like that. And as we've talked about with Unified Sports on this program before, with those that facilitated and started it in basketball in particular, also in Hendricks County, it is oftentimes the varsity athletes that are the ones that get the biggest victory and uplift from it, because then when they go out on Friday nights, they realize even more so the blessing and the fortune that they have. So it's a win-win all the way around, and thank you to Indiana Special Olympics. Thank you to the Indianapolis Colts, and thank you to Ben Davis, Carmel, Washington, Zionsville, Fishers, Tech, all for allowing for that unity of everybody coming together over at the Colts complex, and those kids like Gwen to be able to have their dreams come true of finally being able to play in those sports, score touchdowns, and get a win no matter what the scoreboard says, just like the old commercial used to say. Unified Sports is something, if your school doesn't have it, I strongly encourage you to talk to the athletic program about it, or the IHSAA, which does get involved in bringing these students together. We'll come back. We will get Jimmy's plays of the day and start talking about what we think is going to happen down in the First Coast of Florida between the Colts and Jags on Sunday.
Today's plays of the day brought to you by Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional, comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in central Indiana. They'll take your signage ideas, take hold of the project from design all the way to delivery. Family-owned and managed business for more than 4 generations. You don't often get a second chance to make a first impression. Make the most out of your first opportunity with the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. For more information, go to greenfieldsigns.com. Today's plays of the day, ironically, the time of year where the word today isn't really doing any heavy lifting because it's plays for the weekend. We will start first in college football. We'll lay the 13.5 on the Indiana Hoosiers. They're favored by 13.5 on the road against Northwestern Wildcats. So we'll take the Hoosiers, as Eddie alludes to there. In the late night action where game day is this weekend, it's Cal takes on Miami. Cal is 10.5-point dogs. I will scoop the 10.5 there on Cal as they host 8th-ranked Miami. Also,
so that means you think Miami's going to cover, or you think Cal's?
I think Cal's going to cover.
Okay.
Cal's getting 10.5. I think they're going to cover the spread. I think Miami wins outright, though. In baseball on Saturday, it's a loaded slate. We will start first in order. Give me the Detroit Tigers on the money line to win on the road against the Cleveland Guardians.
Wow.
I will also lay 1.5 on the run line. Philadelphia favored by 1.5 on the run line against the New York Mets. First pitch there, 4:08. Yankees Royals at 6:38. Give me over 5.5 total strikeouts for Yankees ace Garrett Cole. In the nightcap on Saturday, I'll take the Dodgers to win on the money line over the San Diego Padres. 2 NFL bets for you. This is, if not now, when territory for the Cincinnati Bengals. They need this win over Baltimore. I think they get this win. They're plus 110 on the money line. Give me the Bengals outright over the Ravens as they host Baltimore. I'll also take the Houston Texans on the money line as they host the Buffalo Bills. Eddie, any bets for you for the Monster Sports Weekend?
Yes. I will be taking under 7.5 between the Dodgers and the Padres. I love this pitching matchup. Dylan Cease and Yoshinobu Yamamoto for the Dodgers. That's on the nightcap. I will take the under 7 between Detroit and Cleveland. I know Tanner Bybee's on the mound. He hasn't been great, but the Detroit offense has not been great against starters, at least in the Astro series. And I think that environment in Cleveland will be absolutely electric compared to how much of a lame duck Houston was in their first 2 games of that series and the only 2 games of that series. So, and then tonight, I like the over 53.5. Between Syracuse or 55.5 between Syracuse and UNLV, 2 very high octane offenses. Even though UNLV's quarterback, he's a senior with a lot of experience. Not a lot of people know him. Very dual threat. I think they're going to be able to put up points on that porous orange defense.
That's UNILV.
UNLV.
UNILV, right?
UNLV.
Those are your plays of the day.
Eddie going with the over-under in the UNLV Syracuse game absolutely screams of this. Sports. Did you happen to get the final in that Syracuse UNLV? Hang on just a second here. Let me look. It's on the wire somewhere.
Did you get that call last night from Jimmy about Sterling Shepard? Because I think
no.
they can only have
Neil
Brown.
Brown.
He did not get that.
Chef extraordinaire in Indianapolis, Neil Brown. Last night, I was with my parents picking them up, dropping them off actually from a fundraiser that I was at with them, and all of a sudden I get a text from Neil Brown, and it says Sterling Shepard, right? Is the name?
Yeah,
Sterling Shepard TD, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, but the bet was whether or not he was the over-under on 19.5 yards.
Needed yardage.
4 yards, right?
1 catch, 4 yards. They're saving him after that hot game last week against Philly.
Did you notice at the end of that game, and again, I absolutely love everything about him, but the Al Michaels game-winning touchdown, I mean, the Falcons score a walk-off touchdown, to use a baseball term. I think Michaels was like momentarily confused as to whether or not that ended the game or whether or not Tampa was going to get the ball back. Because he just kind of was like, it's here, and he's going to go in for the touchdown, and then there's kind of a pause. And the Falcons win in incredible fashion. It was very like non-Michaels-like, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one that noticed it. But
I mean, I don't know, Jake. Like we've talked about it. Al Michaels, one of my favorite broadcasters still, but like the energy level has dipped a bit, especially in that Thursday night window.
He had that same kind of feel when the Jags made that miraculous comeback, or as I call it, the epic collapse against the Chargers in that one playoff game that Trevor Lawrence has on his resume.
That was again. And that was kind of the peak, right? And it's been a struggle since. I mean, Lawrence is still young, but, man, they got to get it figured out, which takes us to Sunday, what we think is going to happen. By the way, JMV up next. He is in Twin Peaks. He will also have Billy Joel tickets to give away today, but still plenty of time for you to get up and enjoy a cold beverage or a Diet Coke should you. That's perfectly sufficient as he's at Twin Peaks up next. But, Jimmy, your thoughts on what happens on Sunday?
The losses of Kwity Paye and especially Kenny Moore, you asked me that yesterday. Who did I feel like was more of an impact loss if he winds up not being able to go? It would be Kenny Moore because of what you're asking of this secondary already down Juju Brents. This is going to be an ugly game, but Jacksonville showed enough for me last week where I think this is a get-right game for them. I think the drought continues for the Colts in Jacksonville. I have it 20-17, Jags. Matt Gay 50-yarder missed to tie it, and the Jags wind up winning for the first time this year.
Okay. I'm going to look up the forecast for what it's going to be like on Sunday, Eddie, while you are giving us your prediction for the score itself.
Rain. It should rain almost the entirety of the game. I took the Jags 20-13. I actually think the loss of Kwity Paye looms larger than Kenny Moore just because of the weather. You're going to look at probably a lot more Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby action from the Jags, and that Colts run defense the first 2 weeks was bad. It has been better the last 2 weeks, but that defensive line, I don't know if they're going to be able to hold up over the course of 60 minutes of action there. So I will take the Jags 20-13.
The rain chances do dip to about 40% by 1 o'clock. But, yeah, it looks like it's not going to be great. Field's going to be wet. And I'm sorry, Eddie, you said what for your score?
Jags 20, Colts 13.
Man, I thought I was going to be – because I don't think I have picked against the Colts so far this year,
I don't think you have either. I did last week.
But this is the first time that I'm going to do so. And it doesn't have anything to do with the history of it. I think that the uncertainty of quarterback, not just at who is starting for the Colts, but rather what – if it's Anthony Richardson, what you're going to get. I don't think he's at the point yet where we can consider him reliable enough to say that he's going to be able to have a good game, despite L.C. Gregory, who's like, you guys are just absolutely carrying the water for Anthony Richardson. Really? We dubbed him the human roller coaster. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm telling you, the Colts, if he's able to go, are going to go with him anytime that they can get him to play, because this year is about his development. It is about his development more than anything else. But that development still has a lot of work to do, and that includes the reason why I just think when they go down there, does Jacksonville start to really get in sync offensively? I think that is a little bit much. But to your point, Jimmy, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Kenny Moore not being out there, and then Kwity Paye just giving if you already had DeForest Buckner and Tyquan Lewis, maybe you'd say, okay, but that just depletes things. You guys, you said
I said 2017. Eddie said 20.
And Eddie said a touchdown. I'll go 22-19.
But I say Joe Flacco starts as well on Sunday because of Richardson's health. Who do you think goes? Eddie, who do you think?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. It's Joe Flacco.
Okay.
If he's practicing today, then that tells
that's my
you.
lean. Yeah.
I mean, that's what's interesting. Like, again, you would think that if Richardson could go, he's going to go. But we'll talk about it all on Monday. Chris Hinton, great interview earlier. A lot of fun with him, and that is going to be available on the podcast form as well at 1075thefan.com. John's up next. We'll talk to you Monday at noon on Query & Company.